I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the world's most influential basketball podcast. We have another perfect pod coming right at you. Coming at you like spring's arrival in New York City. Wow, it's like it's like an air horn. Andrew Quo, how are you, you little spring chicken?
I'm sprung, man. It's incredible out here in New York City. I'm doing some spring cleaning. I'm throwing out all my Russian dolls. I'm pouring out all my vodka that I've been hoarding. Dostoevsky books out. You know the vibe. My vibe shift is getting rid of all my Russian dressing. What? Okay.
And I'm actually retroactively removing all my high scores in Russian attack.
Can you clear this up once and for all for me personally? Mm-hmm. What is Russian dressing?
I feel like it's sort of
other than
akin to Thousand Island dressing, right?
Is there a splash of ketchup in there? Is it like mayonnaise and ketchup and relish is what I'm saying?
I think it's mayonnaise and ketchup.
Is the secret sauce always that?
Yeah, in the same way that rosé is just a mix of red and white wine. Oh, you want some rosé? One moment.
I did that once at a bar because there was I had a half a cup, I believe, of red, and someone was trying to get a bottle of white off the table, and I was like, you just pour it into my red. To the gasp and horror and shock of people at the table, it was fine. Wine shit is so, let's say, what's the right word? Arbitrary?
Well, it's crazy that people are that uncomfortable and they see how the rosé actually gets made.
No one actually wants to see the sausage get made, but it's the rosé people are really talking about.
So here you go. Here is your Russian dressing recipe, straight from Epicurious. Mayonnaise, onion, half cup of ketchup-style chili sauce. That sounds a lot like ketchup. Or ketchup, so yes. There's some horseradish in there, some hot sauce, some Worcestershire sauce.
This sounds a little fancy. This is
some paprika.
Woo.
But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's definitely mayonnaise and ketchup.
This is also the foundation of Big Mac sauce, like McDonald's special sauce, right? It seems like it is. I haven't had a Big Mac in maybe 20 years. It's not for me. I know it's a carb-on-carb masterpiece, but maybe I should give it another shot and examine this secret sauce.
Not now. Not now.
Oh, I can't do it now. I can't eat Russian dressing now.
If you're even thinking about mixing together mayonnaise and ketchup, think again. Because you are inadvertently an ally to the Russians if you do that.
What is the Ukrainian special sauce that we can dine on?
That I don't know.
Could we just call it
I'm headed
sauce?
to Paul's Baby Grand to confront Ludwig about Russia.
Oh, wow.
Let me into your club. And what's up with Russia? Can you denounce them, please?
I thought we washed our hands of everything Russian in America. Mikhail Prokhorov sold the Nets, so we're done, right? We're good.
Are you calling them Kiev mules? I feel like people are. Ukrainian mules.
I've seen at least 3 or 4 pictures proving your point.
Yeah. Seems a little performative, perhaps. Takes me back to those halcyon days, those giddy highs of freedom fries.
Is there a problem with it? Are we not just performing all the time?
I know I am.
This is the perfect
I am constantly on.
Yeah.
24/7.
There is no perfect in perfect pod without these damn performances, man.
Do people think that we can turn this off?
Yeah.
This perfection
I mean,
flows eternally.
you're looking
It's like
at
an Olympic torch.
you're looking at a fast break layup. There's no defender in sight. Are you not gonna do a 360 flip in the air, turn, twist?
Are we not going to windmill our fries into some Russian dressing?
Is there a signature Russian move? There's been many Russian players in basketball in the NBA. Do they have a signature move? What's Andrei Kirilenko's go-to? Mowing people
that's
down
true.
with his invisible AK-47.
No, that was more white chocolate, Jason Williams.
Ooh, as written about in The Joy of Basketball, a book we published this year.
That is available
Wow.
online in stores. Wow, what a great call out. Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, people forget the Nets. It wasn't just Marcy Projects and real hip hop. You had a bunch of Andrei Kirilenkos, a Bogdanovai, which one we'll never know. Sergei Karasev. It was a cornucopia of heads.
And they had Kirilenko. He was there briefly.
Yeah, that's when I believe I mentioned him. Is he criminally underrated? You're gonna find out in the Joy of Basketball when you pick it up at your local bestseller.
Wow, great mention.
Thanks.
You know what's? I think these performative word time measures, freedom fries, Ukrainian mules, just calling it ketchup and mayo instead of Russian dressing. I think part of that is that as Americans, we have never experienced war in a tactile way on our shores, especially after Vietnam. I mean, in that point, you had people being drafted and the anxiety of leaving your friends, family members, going halfway across the world to die in the jungle. Like that. Yeah. That is pretty tactile, but still not on our shores, right? The only thing we've had was 9/11.
Well,
And we flipped the fuck out.
well, shout out to Obi Toppin and Buddy Hield, who were survivors of the Civil War. So we want to pay respects to our elders that way.
Great reference.
Thank you. Thanks.
Andrew.
Thanks.
But the point that I'm trying to make here is that when we say no more, like, make it a no-fly zone in Ukraine, or let's get more involved, we have to stop them. Like, well, what do you mean? Do you mean we're going to do a little proxy war in Ukraine where we're going to stay removed and we're going to drink our Ukrainian mules and say our tax dollars will go to that and our soldiers will go over there and some will perish, of course, but ultimately we will be spectators to this? It's like Russia's a nuclear power, man. We have mutual assured destruction if we get into World War III.
Yeah.
I think it's difficult for us to look at war, which we have never experienced, in the way of, hey, someone just bombed our building. Let's go down to a shelter. Like, my home is gone. And say, let's ratchet this up. Because saying we need to stop this war with more war is pro-war.
I mean, finding hypocrisy in a situation like this is easy and always leads to more bullshit. And you know, when we scream on Twitter to let Ukraine in NATO, NATO's like, yeah, but you're two hours away from being occupied by Russia. Like, we should have done this years ago, but this is why the conflict is happening. I don't know.
And has been happening for 8 years.
Yeah, he's been planning this for basically his whole life, or the minute he became the person he is in Russia, he had his eyes on Ukraine and Crimea and trying to piece together the USSR again. I don't know. Like, again, I'm cramming for this test like everyone else, and it seems so complicated that if people want to call them something mules, freedom mules, fine. Like, to your point, I don't think we have the right muscle memory to respond to a conflict like this that's very far away in terms of geopolitics around the world, but still in our feeds and in our virtual lives. I don't know what people can do. I think this response is good enough. There's been a little pushback, being like, "Is Ukraine cringe? Is this lame? Is this dorky?" I'm like, all of these things at the same time. It's also heartbreaking. It's also important. It's also the way we talk about it is very important, and the way we miss is fine. Like failing to grasp the core of the proper reaction to something like this is the game. Like, I don't know. I have not talked to someone who isn't an expert on this, but I have not talked to someone who's wrong about anything.
I think our filter of like social media, of how we discuss these things, becomes an issue as well. Like with your man Elon Musk tweeting things in support of Ukraine a week and a half ago, and then tweeting that supporting it is cringe with some Reddit meme yesterday, and you're like,
yeah, he went off.
So you decided that what you were doing before was lame, or I like, does any of this need to happen? Do we need a take on people's gestures? And this is what we're talking about, right? We're talking about Moscow mules, and if someone says, yeah, but you just sticking like a yellow and blue flag up on your Instagram stories is the same as saying freedom fries. It's all irrelevant.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
True. And we are blessed as Americans that we have not had to think about war in real terms for how it affects us and our loved ones for the most part. Happens for soldiers and their families, but very, very few other people. Obviously, there are like trickle-down effects. If we go to war with some country, there are people of that ancestry in America who get treated poorly and differently and hassled. But overall speaking, we can sit here and talk about what's cringe, what's not cringe, what's a freedom fry, what's a Moscow mule, what's Russian dressing, with very little ramifications that could possibly change our own lives.
But I'll throw this out there. Inflation is something that will affect, like, these sanctions will affect the Russian population in horrible ways, and I think it's a direct act of war, these sanctions. And the blowback of this, whether that be inflation, gas pumps, the cost of living, food, this is real. And I will never equate anxiety and poverty for dying in war. I think, I said a few pods ago, I think it's, and I've been trying to figure this out. I think I said, I think we're on this earth in order to figure out what other people we must protect. And I think that is one of the basic human functions. That's why we're here, to align and protect. And if you can protect as many people in your view from harm, that is the objective of a life. And religion, peer pressure, vibes, all of this is to like point into the direction of helping, I think, whatever your point of view may be. And this is why we disagree on things, and this is why war happens, or perfect pods about basketball players. But like, I think what is happening cannot be equated to seeing these people die on the battlefield. But it's always difficult to equate the suffering of somebody who's like, I can't get to my job because it's too expensive to drive there. It's just, and I have 2 kids. So I just want to tip my cap. There is a lot of suffering going on as kind of a reverberating from this conflict.
Sort of. I'm not, I get it. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm also saying that when we're talking about these kind of gestures, it isn't necessarily from people or because of their feelings about gas prices. That may absolutely be hurting people in the pocketbook now and going forward. Gas is
the economy is a very valuable, precious animal that needs to be taken care of, right?
Yeah. I am not saying there aren't ramifications of global conflict that could affect people
Yeah.
in an individual way, economically.
Yeah. I just wanted to throw that out there. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, no,
with
I
you.
get it.
Yeah,
I don't think you're wrong. I don't think you're wrong.
But yeah, the death in war is something we've been spared in our generation as Americans, and I am fucking so grateful. It's wild.
And as you pointed out, basically since the Civil War, there's just been no real conflict on our soil, and that was us. That wasn't a foreign
True.
country coming in and trying to lay siege to our capital. That was the South versus the North, obviously.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think Americans have this detachment that is very unique for a country that is involved in a lot of armed conflict
Oh my God.
in many different ways, for the last 60, 80 years. Australia or New Zealand has been removed as well, but they're not necessarily global police.
I know, and I've had a few people come up to me, I don't know shit, but just trying to start conversations and being like, are we going to go to nuclear war? Are we going to die? And I'm like, you're moving really fast here, and this is the whole function of the Cold War and the new kind of war that in the 80s kind of ushered in of threats, and not like actual physical fighting, but political fighting and economic fighting. And the war of the 80s, the Cold War between the US and USSR, was pretty intense. And I would say, the fall of certain communist regimes in Europe and farther is something Putin has in his mind as something that's not over. And I think as an American, I just want it to be over. Like, when is this going to be over? Can Ukraine just like push them back? Can they just have a ceasefire? And I'm like, oh, sometimes these things last a lifetime.
Yeah, and there aren't always good solutions.
No, yeah.
I mean, yes, we would all like Russia to withdraw their forces and go home. But short of them doing that, what is the solution? If we say, let's get this over with. Oh, so you just want Russia to take over Ukraine and install, a puppet government that is friendly with Putin and move on? Like, is that more comfortable for us? I mean, we can't get involved in this in a way that will escalate towards a potential global war. We just can't do that. And we would also lose our fucking mind if Russia did that to us.
Oh my
if
God.
we sent
yeah.
troops into Somalia, and then, I mean, these proxy wars do happen, and they happen in Middle East and Africa, and
Libya, Syria.
they absolutely do occur.
Yeah.
But if Russia said, hey, you can't fly American jets over this area, we would lose our shit.
I know. It's a tightrope, man, and it hits things that we love, right? Like Petrovic and Vladi, that 30 for 30 about the Yugoslavian conflict, the Serbs and Bosnian. That is just like, that takes over an entire life, and it's framed around basketball in that documentary. But as they were talking, I was just like, oh, basketball doesn't fucking matter here. Like, this is just like it's a conflict that is like felt in their DNA, and having Vlade tell that story and Petro not being around to tell his side of it was just like, it's very intense. But yeah, the Yugoslavian war in the late 80s and early 90s, I believe, that was insane too. And like, we've been given kind of like a tiny break, even though the Middle East has been a big it's been so fucked up for so long. And I don't blame anybody for reacting kind of, whatever word you want to use, towards this Ukrainian war. It is confusing, and we don't have the language for it.
I think that's true. It's also just bears repeating, even though everyone talks about this. The idea that war in Europe is a foreign concept is so freaking weird.
Yeah.
As you were just talking about what happened with the former Yugoslavian states and Bosnia, Serbia. That's Europe, man. That's Europe.
Yeah.
What happened in, the Republic of Georgia and Russia, or in Crimea.
Yeah.
Like, there have been many, many wars and lots of death in
Yeah.
Europe over the last couple decades, let alone going back to massive planetary strife. I don't know. There's this weird thing that makes people shocked when it's Ukrainians and not people from Syria. But we don't need to belabor that point. We know we know that this has been happening. It is still just staggering to me, considering how much war has happened due to the proximity of various groups and all these tiny little nations with different allegiances and ethnic groups and their own individual issues within Europe forever.
Yeah. I'm still not. I can't wrap my head around the IRA in England, like that.
Oh yeah, the Troubles. We didn't even mention the Troubles.
Yeah, it's still confusing to me, and I try to read about it, and I'm just like, it's very complex and many moving parts and very intense, and that happened very recently. Like, that was just it's a generation ago, maybe, like baby boomers.
Belfast was a war zone.
Yeah. It is. Yeah, I don't know how to avoid things like this, and I don't know if people are asking to avoid things like this, but to your original point, to have all these things happening away from America deprives us of the language we need to discuss it, but also is like a respite that I'm very grateful for.
I'm going to lead this into something that you've been obsessing over. And this is Andy Warhol related. And I think these ideas of language to discuss things is somewhat applicable. Mm-hmm. You want to talk Warhol, don't you? I can feel
always.
it. I can sense it. You got some Warhol takes to get off.
I get N beer in me, and I got some Warhol takes for you, man.
Talk about what from one Andrew to another.
Well, I've had these takes for a while, but I'm glad that he's being talked about, because there's a Ryan Murphy documentary on Netflix based off of his diaries, and it's not your normal Warhol documentary. There's many of those, but it uses artificial intelligence to read his passages from that book, that published diary book, in his voice, generated by, I believe, an actor said it, and then the computer changed his voice to Andy Warhol's voice. Pretty amazing, one would say, like classically Warholian, which brings me to my beef with him, maybe.
And this technology is also what was used in the Anthony Bourdain documentary, right?
Yep, exactly. And I didn't see that. I'm looking forward to seeing that too. It's cool. Like, I'm down for this stuff, but just on a surface level, the documentary, that technique has a very low ceiling, because I think a lot of language, as we were talking about, is timing and inflection and these weird glimpses into what someone's really saying. There's always the things people say and what they are implied to say, and I think human beings, in IRL, that interaction is invaluable, because you kind of infer stuff based off of pauses, tone, even a facial expression, whatever, in documentaries. And this technique is so based on authenticity and making his voice believable that you get none of the subtlety of a human being. And I love computers. I'm not even shitting on computers. I love this idea. But computers can't tell good jokes yet because there's so many different elements of language that comes into play when you deliver a story like that. And Warhol came off as like a dunce, kind of like an emotional and artistic moron. And it's the technology, and it doesn't serve him well in this case.
Yeah, that's a good point, because something being read in your voice without the cadence, without the smirk, without the wink, without all the little affectations that give more meaning to any sort of statement, it seems different. But it's funny because it's also just the written word that's going this way. So the reader could also have made the wrong assumptions too, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's the oddity, is that those little verbal tics aren't there when he's writing, but maybe it is actually easier to interpret it because you're not reading into the way it's being spoken.
For sure. And I believe the Huffington Post aggregates a lot of their words. A lot of these NBA.com game summaries are just generated by computers, and there's a few million different combinations of words that they pick from, and it's well written. It's probably better written than most human beings could do. Did you see that 60 Minutes piece about the Holocaust Museum? This is pretty amazing. They have like thousands and thousands of hours of interviews with Holocaust survivors, and they're sending an AI to interpret or aggregate all that information into a program where people, young people in the future, when there are no survivors left, can speak to a computer, and they can have a conversation with a computer generated from these thousands of hours of a Holocaust survivor answering questions. So it would be like, what was it like? It's just like, well, I was here, and this is my day-to-day, and this is how I felt. It was kind of amazing. And also, whatever, I don't believe in dystopia. That idea is useless, I think. But it was so far advanced that it kind of made me shudder.
I can see the benefit of those things. A lot of them also appear to be ways to avoid reading, which I support.
Oh, fuck yeah.
You know, you could just read this thing that the person wrote, but then you'd be reading.
Yeah,
there'd be words in front of your eyes, and you wouldn't be listening to them or engaging directly in conversation with Anne Frank. Instead, you have to read her diaries. Like, who has time for that?
Wait, what's up with the gatekeepers letting Wordle through? How did they... NFTs happened. Gatekeepers like, not on our watch. Good job, gatekeepers. Wordle just got through like a knife through butter, man.
Wait. I obviously know Wordle. I know NFTs. I know you. I know the words that are coming out of your mouth. I know gatekeeping. Extrapolate this. What are you saying to us, Andrew Kuo?
I'm no NFT boy. I'm not an NFT. I don't go around flipping JPEGs for thousands of fake dollars, but that is pretty interesting, and it's been shot down by the people I consider to be like tastemakers, whatever. People I like to listen to who are smart and funny, whatever. Successfully. Now they have convinced me NFTs are not the thing I'm interested in. Whatever. I'm still... I'm with it. This fucking Wordle thing, though, is the dorkiest thing I can... everyone tries their best in life, right? But this fucking Wordle thing, man, posting your Wordle scores, like, oh, Wordle was really tricky today. I'm like, what are we doing, and where are the people in charge here? Like, can we have an adult in the room to shoot this down?
So Wordle has been discussed in this pod maybe a month ago when it was rising as a trend, and now it's
here, baby.
As you mentioned, it's omnipresent, right?
Yeah.
It's everyone just posting their score, and at first, if someone put up a score that was, I don't know, like they got the word in 2 guesses, it might merit some interaction. Like, wow,
I don't even know what that means. Guesses. So you're
you
guessing
get-
a word.
So you get it. You're trying to guess 5-letter words, and it starts out, and there's six
Horn.
rows. So you get 6 guesses to try to find their word, and each time it fills out a row. So you might start with your first one. You'd say a tone, 5-letter words, commonly used letters, and then you find a few of those letters in there, and you take another guess. So you get 6 guesses.
So this is Wheel of Fortune.
It's a little like Wheel of Fortune. I think that's a reasonable way of putting it.
A good show.
And when someone would get it really fast, when Wordle was new, it kind of commanded a damn, ooh, wow. And now I don't know why anybody posts it. There's not even interesting interactions that could be that could be like baited from it. Oh shit, you didn't get it. Oh, you got it in 4 guesses. Like there's nothing. I don't understand why people post it. I do Wordle. You know, I like word games. They're fucking dorky. I do Wordle. I never posted it once in my life. Like, you know, some things you just don't have to post. You don't have to post your Wordle score.
I mean, at the very best, it's a humble brag. At the very worst, it's just a brag, right? Let me reframe.
I mean, the funniest thing was Carl Anthony Towns posted a Wordle score, and the way that they post it publicly is to preserve spoilers. They post like the letters. They post none of the letters, but the blocks are colored to indicate where you got your points and how you figured it out. And Carl Anthony Towns, shout out to that king who scored 60 points last night, absolute monster. Yeah. Someone responded and was like, "What was your second word? Because there's no word in the English language that could have had those spots colored the way that they are and gotten you to the third guess." And
what was
he
his
did not
response?
respond. Well, he faked his Wordle score.
He is also not known as the coolest NBA player in the league right now. You know, like he's probably one of the best centers. He's an all-star. He won the 3-point competition. I wouldn't say like a kid's like my favorite player is Karl Anthony Towns to prove my point. But I want to reframe this. I don't want to sound negative about it. I think if we're going to accept Wordle, let's accept riding pants. Let's accept Yeezys. Let's accept Russian dolls. Like
I don't really accept people posting their Wordle score. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm also saying I don't necessarily accept it as being interesting. I like once in a blue moon, like I'm talking once every 6 months, I'll put up like a crossword puzzle because I thought a clue was funny.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying crossword puzzles are any less lame than Wordle. Whatever, they've just been around longer. It's funny, our friend of the pod, Caitlin Phillips, said, tweeted yesterday, "This whole Wordle thing makes me sick."
She's great. We gotta have her
symptomatic.
on. Yeah.
As in it's symptomatic. And then she quoted or screenshot a book that said, I don't know which she's referencing here, but this is a screenshot from a book that says, by 1927, a widespread neurosis became evident, faintly signaled like a nervous beating of the feet by the popularity of crossword puzzles.
Yep, I agree with her. And look, we were so swift with French fries. It was just gone. Freedom fries overnight. Mules, no longer from Moscow.
Dude, I just was looking at my desk. I am compromised, Andrew.
Oh, no.
I have a copy of Nikolai Gogol's Diary of a Madman sitting on my desk in front of me. It's in my hand right now.
What?
Was he subversive? Is he just too Russian for me to read, or is he sufficiently rebellious because of his stories like The Nose and so forth? And then I looked at my wall. You will not believe this, Andrew Quo. There is a women's basketball poster from Moscow 1980 on my wall, showing women playing basketball in tiny shorts.
Wow. Well,
I'm cooked. Cancel culture is real. I am borscht.
All you have to tell the internet is you're reading the Diary of Mark Madsen, but maybe the show adaptation of it with an AI voice as Mad Dog Madsen himself.
No, it's about advertising, guys. It's the Diary of a madman.
Listen,
about
we've all,
Don Draper, and it's read in the voice of Don Draper.
first Alfred E. Newman was born in Boston, became part of the Boston media mafia, but disguised his teachings of the Celtics in his magazine, Mad.
Oh man, yeah. Some of this content, I mean, is not going to really work in the voice of Don Draper. Like this sentence from page 133. The throng stirred, then rushed towards the outskirts of the camp with the intent of slaughtering all Jews.
Yikes! That's
Okay.
that's unnecessary.
All right, so the audio version of this does not work.
So my beef with Warhol
of
kind of like precedes this documentary. The documentary actually made me like him more. It's very sweet. It's done with a very loving eye. Ryan Murphy made it personal in terms of his own experience, I think, making art and being a part of the subculture he is a part of. And that part was awesome. Seeing like the intimate side of Warhol was great. The beef I had with him that was pre-existing was like, he tragically died when I was a kid. And all I've heard as an artist in New York City was everything's Warholian. Oh, Facebook, Warholian. Twitter, Warholian. Kanye West and Julia Fox, Warhol predicted this. And I'm like, is an artist or generation allowed to claim stake over the idea of celebrity, ego, fame? I don't know. Like, I think...
Can we just use Orwellian and Warholian interchangeably? Because that gets really funny and dumb.
Yes, right? Like, anything Orwellian... did Orwell invent Warhol? Like, no one wants to talk about that, right? Did Orwell paint amazing pictures? Or did Warhol write Sorry About a Pig?
Wow. Like, Julia Fox's baby's father is at Lucien again. That is so Orwellian.
Andy Warhol's 15 Minutes of Fame thing is a very loose concept at best. And he doesn't really go on to explain it in detail. And whatever. He's a bona fide genius, right? Like, I have no problems with him sitting on the top, the Kevin Durant of artists, I would say. But he works better to me as one of the best painters ever. The things he did, the factory seemed like an awful place. A regular at the factory came back to shoot him. It was that toxic. And this documentary doesn't really present a different light on that. He presents it as like a pecking order, a ladder where people were trying to get at him. It had the guise of something creative, but really it was just like a political structure within a space of art. I don't credit Warhol with creating the Velvet Underground, even though they were around the same thing and collaborated. I don't credit Warhol with Jean-Michel Basquiat, even though they collaborated and were in the same time period and very, very good friends. These are things that would have happened, I think, without Warhol. Or maybe not, like everyone influences each other, but not in terms of authorship. We're not allowed to give that to Andy Warhol. Andy Warhol was the best painter of maybe our lives, but as a social commentator and as a philosopher, he was fine. These are good ideas. A lot of these ideas, in my opinion, don't belong to him, and George Orwell maybe had this idea before. A lot of these guys, like I think Da Vinci was like a megalomaniac. Megalomaniacism and creativity go hand in hand, and to give that to Warhol, I think, is like a bit much.
Is it a coincidence that some of Warhol's later works were created in 1984?
What? Goddamn. Goddamn.
But as you know, there is this connection between celebrity and socializing and your circle of influence that is impossible to detach from art, right? I mean, maybe not in every single circumstance, but someone making the same art in a like garage in Rochester, New York
Shout out to that.
is not the same. Yeah, the
Paradise.
RX art is not the same as someone who is intensely popular in the New York City social circuit, hanging out with all the cool people, going to Studio 54, putting tinfoil around an entire cocaine drug lair, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, and I'm sure that's been the case forever. Like Truman Capote was a great writer, but he probably had a lot of extra clout because of his little soirees. Like, I think these things kind of one hand washes the other in that regard. Like, you become popular for your art and well known, and then you like insert yourself into the social world. Is Andy Warhol the best case example of that? Is he the modern prototype?
I mean, probably. I mean, before him, Jackson Pollock was really interested in like Peggy Guggenheim and infiltrating the wealth of Manhattan, and Warhol. And this is what I was tweeting about as I was watching this. I think a lot of people attribute Warhol's time with like a burst of creativity or a unique group of people. We always talk about personnel here, like Lou Reed, goddamn Lou Reed, right? You had Lou Reed, Andy Warhol, Basquiat, all in the same fucking room with like Julian Schnabel. That's crazy. Whose son you beat in the Nada tournament twice in a very controversial but thrilling finale. But anyway,
Shout out to Psy.
yeah, I
No,
think,
that's my guy. That's my guy.
and it's great that we have your boy as mayor right now, Eric Adams, who constantly bloviates in front of a camera, being like, "I miss New York when it was weird. Why can't we be the cultural center of the world again?" Because I don't think we are per se anymore, and in order to do that, he would have to do things he's not willing to do, which is make housing affordable again, and kind of let some lawlessness creep in. Like, let people squat, let neighborhoods kind of organically form their own identity instead of this like Bloombergian vision of New York where everything is ready for an ESPN The Zone to just plop down in Dime Square.
Look, if you weren't at the All-Star Cafe, I don't want to hear about how cool Midtown is and how you go to the Pebble. I know you want to go to the Pebble. Look, All-Star Cafe day ones. No. Like, were you at Copacabana when I was on 57th Street? I don't want to hear it.
Why would they call a town mid for nothing?
What about Lit Town?
But
Well, look, it's fine. It's definitely better than Down Bad Town.
and I think artists, I hear people saying the last few generations, Zoomers, Gen X, and Millennials, those artists have to deal with technology. Totally, and technology is tied to real estate. But my observation is New York City is just about real estate, and it's where people who are kind of weird and who kind of don't have marketable skills but are really talented, where they can live. Whether that be Ridgewood or the Lower East Side, I don't know, but it's getting fucking expensive, and Eric Adams is not going to have his groovy, weirdo city unless he changes some policy.
I don't really know what his version of a
Yeah, I don't.
weirdo city is. He just hangs out at Zero Bond with celebrities and eats expensive sushi.
Is it vegan sushi?
No, he eats fish.
Oh, so he's a
He
pescatarian.
had that recent profile. I want to say it was Politico. It may have been New York Mag, but I think Politico.
Yeah.
But he talked about how he thought New York had this special energy because it's on a trove of precious minerals and gems. And
What?
yes, and then there was an article. I want to say it
Amazing.
was maybe Jacobin. Someone wrote about, and I think justifiably so, how all of his quirks and his weirdness detracts from, he is basically pushing very cruel law enforcement tactics, especially towards homeless people and so forth.
He's a police officer. Yeah.
He's a top cop.
Yeah.
And is his idea of a cool, wacky swag city, people walking around with open containers? Clearly not. Is it illegal loft parties? No. It remains weird. It remains weird that he talks about wanting this creative, interesting city, but there doesn't seem to be anything about the things he actually likes or wants to do to reflect that. It feels like he just wants people to go back to work and to build more high rises and to have thriving nightlife and business and civic events and spirit versus actually cultivating whatever he's pretending to enjoy about New York.
He's got such strong bridge and tunnel energy, man. I feel like what he means is like, I want to come in on the weekends and go to the tunnel. Remember the tunnel?
I agree. He's like, I want it to be popping.
Yeah, yeah.
Shit should be popping. Like back in the day, we used to go to Enid's, and it was Ballers Eve, and you'd hear 3-6 Mafia, and it was popping. Now you go there, it is a mid-Mexican restaurant. That is not the swag city that I know and love.
Wow, Enid's vibe shifted, huh?
It closed down like 3 years ago, right? Maybe 2 years ago.
Something like that.
Was it a pandemic casualty?
I believe it was
may have been.
pre-pandemic. I think it was a vibe
I kind
casualty,
of think you're right. I think it's I think it perished due to vibes.
Yeah, I used to go there quite a bit in different iterations in the indie sleaze days. For sure, that shit was very popping. And then when it was kind of just, it turned into an ESPN The Zone vibe. A bunch of our friends started working there, and I used to go a lot just to hang out with them at the door. You know, it was a cool place. I can't believe people had brunch there like 3 hours after people were dancing on the tables.
I always was stunned by that.
Yo, how good was that cleanup crew? I don't know. I've never had
I don't
brunch
know.
there.
It was always insane to me for the exact same reason.
Yeah.
It's like we were whiling in here.
Yeah, you're serving food. You're making eggs
4
in
hours
here?
ago.
I would not eat off that table, sir. But
We were smoking in the kitchen.
it got wild at Enid's, and it was far. It was like in Greenpoint. It was north of McCarran, so it was kind of off the beaten Williamsburg path a little bit. Shit got hectic.
That, you know, your poached eggs are not the first thing in your salad. It's not the first thing that's been chopped on that plate within the last 5 hours.
Are you telling me there's raw eggs on the premises right now as people are just doing hectic drugs and just opening every door and dancing everywhere?
I would say I went there most frequently around maybe like 08, 07.
Oh, that's
definitely
a second era to me, right?
It was well, I was going there a lot during Ballers Eve. We go there a lot with like
shout out
my
to-
buddy Matt Kay,
Yeah,
who
yeah.
worked at Happy Ending and worked at Dark Room. No, not Dark Room. I forget, a bunch of different bars like Savalas, and then he would sort of Pied Piper these like massive crews of like 20 skateboarders, and it was like the Dobbins Block crew that we
Yeah.
would go there with. But those were really fun. Like Jay Scott used to DJ a lot. Rest in peace. He was an awesome dude. Those were probably the most fun like rap related parties that Williamsburg had since like Stinger Bar.
Yeah, shout out to Jay Dirt, who used to do a show at EVR and used to hook us up at Lil Frankie's. And he's threatening to move back to New York City. We need more people like him. And to my Eric Adams point, like, he used to be a great DJ, and this was like a really fun. This was the mixtape era, Dirty South era of rap, and I remember those parties. Those are fantastic, man. And it, wasn't a club like One Oak or Avenue later, but it had a great vibe, and people.
Just for people who haven't been there, it was a packed bar that had an elevated DJ booth, which made it feel a little
Very
like a
high.
club. But it was
Very high.
absolutely a restaurant bar that just kind of cleared out a big space for sort of a dance floor
Yeah.
and got really, really packed on weekends. And the East Village Radio show that he's talking about was called Ballers Eve, and it was some guys from Atlanta who started one of, I would say, New York's first like really Southern-centric rap radio shows, and did parties that were all Southern music. And the era that we're describing was a lot of like Jeezy and Gucci and 3-6 and all those, OJ the Juice Man, those kind of artists.
Yeah, it was an awesome era, and as I get older, and I realized, like, at the time, I just thought this was a part of New York. It's like, yeah, a couple dudes. Those are the dudes that throw that, Southern rap party. And those are the dudes that are in that band. That guy puts on, shows in warehouses after hours. It's like it's been priced out, man. And Bloomberg did his damn thing. Like he took away people's. He measured risk aversion with nightlife, and he really squashed it. Like people weren't willing to pay fines, deal with cops, go down to the hole, like get handcuffed. Like it was just a pain in the ass. People, he took liquor licenses away from really cool bars to give them to hotels. Like it was strategic and precise.
It's a weird thing that changed, and I would say this happened under Bloomberg as well, despite his aversion to nightlife overall, because this is when I remember it changing. But there was a point when you couldn't buy beer after 4 a.m.
I remember that.
And
that was so stupid.
they would actually chain the cooler doors together with bike locks or padlocks in corner stores and delis, bodegas, etc. after 4. So you'd walk in there and they'd be either locked in places where they, especially like the East Village, where they feared people would be trying to buy stuff. Other neighborhoods, you could kind of be slimy about it and like get something. Some neighborhoods just didn't care. Some places it was all good 24/7 if you wanted to. And you kind of know those places. Like, well,
the places they cared about the real estate was valuable.
Right. If you go down 2 blocks and then make another 2 blocks, there's a place down there that'll sell you stuff at 6 a.m.
Totally. Or if you know a guy. Yeah.
Right. And then the other move that we used on occasion when it was really desperate measures was you go in and you'd get like your tall boy and you just open it up as you're walking to the register and then plead ignorance.
Yep.
Because then they're like, all right, well, I have to sell it to you. I'm not going to put the lid back on. I'm not going to eat a $3 loss on this tall boy of Heineken or whatever. That was the desperate move. Was like just going to pop it in line. And then they'll be like, all right, here's your $3. Because you're clearly not a cop.
Did I ever tell you that story? I was hanging out on Ludlow after the bars closed at 4, and some dude I was standing next to was drinking a paper bag, 12-ounce can in a paper bag, and the cop rolls up. He's like, I need to see some ID. Like, you're coming with me tonight, man. You just can't do that in front of me. And he took out his paper bag, and it was a celery soda. The cop's like, oh, my bad. Keep on, carry on with your night. He turns to me. It's like it's full of vodka, man. It's like all he had to do was smell it, and I'm going downtown. But
there are some really weird laws about that, and some of them were conflicting, and some may have been urban mythology.
Yeah,
I remember there was the one where it's like if you had it in a paper container,
right,
then the cops weren't allowed to look in it or pull you over because it wasn't visible.
They need a search.
And then there was a thing
on, right?
There was something weird like that, right?
Yeah.
And if it was open, they weren't allowed to drink it, so they could smell it, and then you could say actually it was not beer; it just smelled like beer. There were all these ways to try to get around it. Yeah. I don't know. I ended up getting a couple tickets and paying for them, and going to Brooklyn Holding Tank overnight.
Damn.
And that sucked. But we've talked about this before. But there were all these weird things where it's like, at this point, I have not seen someone stopped for an open container in a long time. And I also have not seen any corner stores that don't sell beer after 4 a.m. At some point, it just stopped being enforced.
Right.
I don't know that it was on the books or if it was told that they were going to stop enforcing it, but it just was.
Same with cabaret license. I remember cops used to bust people for dancing. This is so ridiculous even to say.
That was so weird. That was so weird. That was Giuliani, though, right?
That was Giuliani. And if the cops had a target on your bar, which they did because they wanted to take away licenses and give them to people who had influence in hotels and all these new businesses, and there would be undercover cops hanging out in bars, and when a song comes on, like 3-6 or a Waka Flocka, something that pertinent of the time, and like people got up and started dancing, the owner could get a ticket. And this would happen sometimes, and I was just like, this is cruel and unusual. This is like not a joyful life, like to do this and we know why you're doing it, to harass the owners. But it's wild. I remember being at a bar at one point and being like, everyone, can you stop dancing? Can the DJ like stop playing music people like? I'm like, this just seems like not Eric Adams, New York.
This goes back to what I was asking before. What do people actually want? Do people want it to be creative and lawless and weird and a little bit edgy and dangerous? Do people want it to be Disneyland for adults? Do people?
Yeah.
I still don't get what people want. You know,
Right.
Your man Gary Joe Cabana rolls into the MoMA the other day, stabs up the employees, goes on the run. Of all places they find him, Philly.
Oh, weird. I didn't know that.
Oh.
Tell me. Wait, I didn't know they found him.
Found him in Philly, down there booing Ben Simmons.
Wow. So
They actually did find him in Philly, though.
that's an odd place to hide. He was, so the story is he had a membership and he had been acting inappropriately, so they revoked his membership, and he went there knowing that they would not let him in, and he jumped over the table and stabbed 2 employees superficially and fled. Is that the whole story?
Yes, and then there was the iconic image of a attractive woman who worked there, grinning as she's being let out on a
Amazing.
gurney, covered with blood, saying, "I'm going to get hazard pay."
Amazing.
Queen.
Yeah. But that was an odd story that ended up not being, thankfully, ended up not being that interesting. It's just a crazy person. It has nothing to do with art. It has nothing to do with the MoMA or New York City.
Exactly, and I saw people discussing this. Like, there's the MoMA stabbing. There's someone who's like shooting homeless people, which is terrible. Obviously, fucking terrible.
Terrible.
But people saying, "Oh my God, I'm like New York is very scary right now."
Good.
Also, not really.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
are you homeless or are you an employee at the MoMA?
Right.
Like, I mean, these things are not threats to you. So this is the same way when we were talking about that meme with Ukraine. When people are like, you expect me to go to work while there's a pandemic and a war going on? It's like, you're not in the war.
Yeah.
Like, New York is not scary because of Gary Joe.
Yeah.
He is not a threat to you. The homeless shooter is not a threat to you. It is a threat to homeless people.
Yeah.
It is scary to be homeless right now. It is not scary to get your coffee and walk home.
I have an overarching question for you. Is empathy cringe? Is that what people mean by cringe? Is if you're just like, oh my God, I just feel so fucking bad about these people in the Ukraine, is there something we can do? I don't want to do it, but someone do something. Like, where does the turn happen?
I don't think empathy is cringe at all.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's more that people perceive it as virtue signaling, even if people have legitimate feelings.
Virtue signaling
And
is
the other-
good. Yeah. I don't want to frame this as a bad thing. Signaling
No,
something cool is good.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not saying that in a negative way. I know the term has negative connotations. I'm saying
Yeah.
someone saying this is what I believe, like Mark Ruffalo says on,
Yeah.
Free Palestine on Twitter. That's not a bad thing. He's getting a message out there. Mm-hmm. Like he's expressing himself and what he thinks about the world. And even if that doesn't necessarily have actual immediate results for the party that he is trying to help, that kind of messaging and idea is still valuable in its own right, and to a degree, right?
Yeah, like the Larry David Anonymous thing. I'm like, a great episode, but also just like put your name on it. It's okay,
But I'm also to answer your question about empathy is that I think the problem is when people main character it. When
Sure.
I'm the protagonist of the
So
homeless people
Warholian
getting
of
shot.
you. Yeah.
It's Orwellian, is what it is.
Orwellian. Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. Absolutely. Main character syndrome.
This is about me.
Right.
This
So
this MoMA thing, it affects me and how I walk around. Like, you're going to Uniqlo.
a great
You're
story.
not you're not at risk from Gary Joe. the MoMA stabber.
And maybe that's the answer to the question. It turns when it becomes not empathy, because empathy
Yes.
exists in a straight line. As soon as you turn it, we're not talking about you being caring about other people. You're talking about how other people's suffering reflects back on you, and that's not quite what we love to.
And it is a totally fine line, because
Yeah.
the empathy itself is how you feel about other people. It is making it about yourself. That's the
Yep,
humanistic quality, is not to see terrible things happening to other people and say, I feel nothing. Doesn't do anything to me. I have no response to this whatsoever. It is to say, this makes me feel a certain way, and I want to help them, and I want to do things for them, and I am bothered by what is occurring to other humans, and that's not right. And it's the reason I know it's not right is because it makes me viscerally feel in a certain way. But there's a fine line between saying, man, that war over there sucks for me to go to work in.
Man,
I'm trying to do my Wordle, and I'm consumed by thoughts of Maripol being bombed.
I have to throw out my Mark Madsen diaries. What? Something I'm not willing to do.
Goggle me, bitch.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, like, if back to the Eric Adams thing, if you, and we all want this, I personally want this very bad, for when Eric Adams says he wants New York to be weird again, I'm like, yes, I am down for this. Our mayor saying this is cool. This idea is cool. Not sure what he means, but even a little, just saying that out in loud is great. In order to get that done is tricky, because Enid's doesn't look like the popping party it does all week. On Fridays, Saturdays, maybe some Thursdays. It is what Eric Adams drives into the city for through the Lincoln Tunnel. And like the neighborhoods that foster amazing things, let's say Union Square during the factory days, Dime Square now, or right below house in Ludlow in Orchard in the aughts, in East Lees. I think those neighborhoods in the day and day to day don't look like, I think, what Eric Adams is talking about. They're just like a bunch of people struggling, hanging out, succeeding, not succeeding. It is just life. It's a life, and people are interesting, and depending on what you think is interesting, but it is a way for people to live, and a lot of those apartments were affordable, and a lot of the resources, infrastructure in those neighborhoods were affordable, and I'm willing to give Eric Adams a benefit of the doubt here, but I doubt he's willing to establish that kind of policy again.
I just feel as if Eric Adams, Ayo Eric, just walks around and is like, that should be a steakhouse. Now this one should be a fancy wine bar. Okay, this one, high-end sushi, open till like 4 a.m.
McNally,
another
do your
steakhouse.
thing. Yeah. Keith McNally.
Yeah, this is like an Italian spot, like lots of bruschetta, like small plates.
Christmas all
what
year
else?
round. Yeah, Veselka 7. Dude, I live in the neighborhood in the vicinity of the Market Line, which is a food court below Essex Crossing. The property taxes in the Lower East Side maybe like tripled in the last 25 years in order to create an infrastructure, and Bloomberg wanted the Lower East Side to kind of resemble Union Square. It never will, because there's a bridge right there, and there's just too much congestion with traffic, in my opinion. But all the taxes went to building this food court and all these new buildings, some with affordable housing, which is, I think, a great idea. Some not. There's a lot of luxury still here and being created. But this food court is a disaster, man. Bad timing. It opened up before the pandemic. But
Is
was
it
full
called
of,
Essex Crossing?
the upstairs is called Essex Crossing, which was the old Essex Market that had been on Essex Street for hundreds of years. Classic place. And they put money into it, and everybody was given at the same price of what they were paying before, just a new place. They could request new appliances. It was amazing. People there were very excited. Or I spoke to a couple of them that didn't want to move. They thought the vibe would be totally off, and they were correct. Like, no one's going to this new place. And I don't know if it's because of the neighborhood or because of the conceit or because of a virus, but the old Essex Market used to be filled with, not for nothing, like weirdos. It was really affordable. There was a barber shop in the corner. There was a pop-up gallery. There was a Dominican supermarket. There was a Korean supermarket. There was also a Puerto Rican supermarket. It was awesome. And the new version has most of these things still and the same people, but it kind of sucks. And downstairs where all these food courts were, they have all these local businesses, the donut plant, pickle guys, a butcher. There's a Veselka down there. It's crickets. It's maybe a third occupied now. It's opened up as maybe 75% occupied, and people are just bailing right and left.
I haven't really been in there more than once, and it felt like a mall. That aesthetic just doesn't do it for me.
But what about Chelsea
Even
Market?
I don't like that either.
Oh, it's
although
so good.
Although I think Chelsea Market is a good version of it, but Chelsea Market's also kind of weird, and it's not designed in that same way. It's serpentine and sort of linear.
Google.
Like you're just kind of walking through this tunnel. It's not the same as Essex Market, which does in a lot of ways and kind of feel. I think, again, I've only been there like one time because it just doesn't hold a lot of interest to me. It did feel a bit like a suburban food court.
I like the way it's laid out, but I hear you. The architects really went kind of brutalist with it. But if that's right, it's a big empty space and it's a square. It looks like an airplane hangar. I love the Chelsea Market, but it always comes down to personnel, and there's a few businesses in Chelsea Market that float the whole thing, like the Lobster Places has been supplying New York with seafood forever. And that being there and them doing such awesome things in there just floats the entire place, in my opinion. If you take that out of the equation, that place is whack. It's like Wordle. And the Essex Market doesn't have that strength. It doesn't have that business that could prop up the whole thing. It doesn't have its superstar.
I mean, this idea of expectations and reality, I'm just going to quickly pivot here to basketball on this basketball podcast.
Go.
Today, this was sort of interesting. There's this account called StatMuse on Twitter. I guess I presume they're on Instagram as well. But anyway, StatMuse started out as as an account that would just put up straight up stats. And they were not actually advanced metrics. They weren't really that interesting. It was not
field goal percentage.
So and so has
minus
scored X amount of points in the last 10 games, or
off on stats.
Exactly. It was like very rudimentary basketball reference, like ESPN, NBA.com stats. Like it wasn't about play type. It wasn't about anything other than kind of box score stats. Like you were not learning anything from that account to begin with. But they had these nice little portraits of players' faces. They were, uniform, and they would put up a lot of stuff. And it would say, like, let's come up with a name, like Joel Embiid has scored over 30 points in the last 8 games. The last player to do that was Kobe Bryant.
Right.
Well, that's a fictional one. But they did that for a while. And over the last month or so, at least this is when I started noticing it, they changed the tenor of how they tweeted. And they started trolling constantly. And for example, they would put up something like James Harden has, 4 threes in his Sixers debut, or 5 threes. He has tied Ben Simmons' record.
Right.
It's like they'd be throwing out their like bait, and they'd be trying to troll and criticize players and make jokes and shit on people. Their interaction really went up. Sorry, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Yeah, quickly. They did one where the Sixers got blown out. It's like no Sixers scored in the fourth quarter as a tribute to Ben Simmons. I was like, ooh, editorializing
Exactly.
this shit.
Exactly. So they changed. This was a shift
Yeah.
that they decided to do to be, more spicy and to get more interactions. But of course, that's totally at odds with what they were ostensibly pretending to be in the first place, which was being a stat-based thing, like just dry, interesting stats. So earlier today, a couple hours ago, they put up a post where they said, "We don't usually read our replies," an obvious lie, "but after doing so for the past few weeks, we realized too little of it is actual sports discussion. We're experimenting with temporarily disabling it to see if we can improve signal, reduce noise, and cultivate a more focused StatMuse community." And they I guess initially had quote tweets on, but now you are unable to actually view the quote tweets as well. And there are no people on. You are not allowed. There are no replies because they set the settings that way.
It's like Diet Prada being like, we don't want to cultivate any blaming or police behavior. This is a website to offer a dialogue. I'm like, what the fuck? You guys started this whole thing.
It's like you guys made the obvious, conscious decision to be a shittier trolley account for engagement. And now you're hand-wringing about it and saying, we're going to solve that by not having replies?
Right. I mean...
Okay, StatMuse.
But just to be devil's advocate, shouldn't StatMuse do with that whatever the hell they want? Like, they're allowed to fuck with this, right? The interns on Cookies Hoops Twitter, like, they go off. We don't tell them what to do. They're rattling their cage. They're posting memes on our Twitter account. Whatever. Fuck StatMuse, right? Like, they don't. I just don't care. Like ESPN. Maybe,
I don't care what they do. I think it should be established. Like, are you a troll, funny comedy account? Is that what this is?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, they have 300,000 followers. The funny thing is, I had actually muted them like last week because
I don't follow them.
I found them annoying.
Yeah.
And I was like, these aren't good stats. They aren't interesting stats.
Yeah.
And now you're just cracking like bland like basketball Twitter regurgitation jokes.
Yeah. To our conversation last pod, I think I've been trying to weed out like the prominent basketball voices that we have, whether they be leprechauns or ESPN, who are also leprechauns, or TNT. It is people who just hate the NBA. I love the NBA, so I love jokes too, so I'm trying to find the good jokes, which is not StatMuse, and also have my feed be fun, because I'm tired of people being like, well, Embiid versus Jokic, one of them is trash. I'm like, nah, they're both amazing. Like, is there a joke there? They're hilarious players. Like, can someone go off a little bit?
And then you're watching them play, and they both have such clear mutual respect for each other.
That's fun.
And they're joking it up
Yeah.
on the court. Obviously, both playing really hard, and both did the kind of things that they're known for doing. Mm-hmm. I thought last night's game between the Sixers and the Nuggets was fantastic.
Yeah, it was good.
Like, exactly what you wanted out of those guys. Embiid had some big defensive plays. He scored a lot of points. He got to the line, had some difficult buckets.
But who owned who? Who humiliated
like,
who? Yeah.
Who crushed the other one's MVP chances?
Yeah.
And I feel like StatMuse, for example, put up a post yesterday that was like, Jokic went 3 of 10 when guarded by Embiid. Yikes! It's like you're right. You're not contributing to the conversation. That's horse shit. Stop it.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was going to say also Jokic did his thing, which were getting a rebound, throwing full court outlet passes.
Oh my God!
Bringing the ball in transition as a 7-footer and throwing no look bounce passes through traffic for easy dunks. I thought they both did exactly what they did and were both awesome.
And I love how different they are. they're two ginormous men, but this is a discussion between the center position and the point guard position. And Jokic is a magician, and I love magic. And Embiid is kind of like a bulldozer, which is also fucking awesome. With his grace, like they're both. I don't know. I went late at night. I went through just the leaders. Jokic is like, God damn, he's having a good season. He's like number one in a lot of like overarching stats, and I know overarching stats are noisy and not to be trusted, like efficiency, box plus minus, win shares, VORP. All these things are like with caveats. Jokic is just number one in all of them. I mean, at a certain point, I'm just like, we should just enjoy these two guys, and the award will come down to the better player. And it doesn't mean Joel Embiid isn't your favorite player.
I'm not trying to make a case for Jokic over Embiid right now. I'm avoiding that conversation. I think they're both awesome, and I don't care.
Oh, I care. This is great.
Me.
Well, let's go.
I'm saying they're both awesome. They're both awesome.
Yeah. MVP is a cool
Jokic.
award.
If Jokic wins, I'm not mad. If Embiid wins, that's cool.
Yeah.
They're both having ridiculously good years. I love that they're both centers. I like that Giannis is probably the third in that mix, who's also a big man, despite the era being so perimeter oriented. You have these guys who are almost like non-traditional, traditional bigs, and it's wonderful. Good for the game. Love it. But I was going to say, even without delving into those stats that get ridiculed on Twitter, I'm not that kind of person. I look at them, I check them out. But, VORP, Raptor, blah, blah, blah. How about this? Jokic is averaging 26, 14, and 8 on 64% field goal shooting on twos and 35% from three. You know, he has a true shooting percentage, which is not that advanced of a stat, of 65%. Like, we don't even need to get into win shares or BPM or VORP or those ones that get ridiculed. The man is putting up 26, 14, and 8 with a steal and a half and almost a block. Like, those are cartoon numbers.
And you can't explain away last night's game just talking about Bones Highland, who went off. That was very fun. But both those players, to your point, had control of their teams. And of course, like, there was moments where they looked superior or inferior to each other, whatever. Pick your possession. But those two guys balled out, and Bones won that game for the Nuggets. But Jokic's play is just like, damn, I think I texted you. I'm like, having a gifted passer on the court changes the entire team experience and like complexion of the game.
You know, those numbers like 26, 14, 8, you know, they compare favorably to anything Shaquille O'Neal ever put up. Any year. I mean, Shaq's maybe his best year ever was in 2000 when he put up 29.7, 13.6, 4 assists. And I think you would take
Very
27, good. 26, 14, and 8 over those, just in terms of just raw, you know, points, rebounds, assists. And Shaq was playing 40 minutes a game. Jokic just playing 33. Look, different era. Tempo was different. 2000s with the dead ball era, which you can read about in The Joy of Basketball.
Wow.
But, like, even if you ignore those advanced stats, he's putting up Shaquille O'Neal style numbers in 33 minutes a game. Like, it is what it is.
Exactly. And, you know, we pick and choose when we enter certain stats or stats at all to talk about players that we want to defend or mock. But, you know, like, I think someone would say, but Shaquille has rings. And I'm like, but Jokic won the game last night. I don't know where this comes in, winning or losing, because it's noisy. Shaquille was always blessed with a running mate that was complimentary to him. I mean, to say the least. And Jokic, Bones was that guy last night, and he stepped into his Dwayne Wade shoes and did a Dwayne Wade. James Harden exists. Like, this is all great stuff, which are great basketball conversations, which is getting to my point. Just to be like, well, who's trash? I'm like, okay, we can do this for a while, but like, I really crave, especially because I haven't been going out because of the pandemic, I really crave conversations about basketball. And when StatMuse, under the guise of providing a premise for a discussion, rains down with this like, yikes, I'm like, God damn it.
It's positively Warholian or Orwellian. I'm going to make a quick Sixers point based on the last couple games because we haven't potted.
Let's talk about the blowout.
We haven't potted since the thrashing that the Sixers took at the hands of the Nets. And after that, they won a close game against Orlando, then lost a close game to Denver. We've spoken a bit about how the Joe Harden dynamic and how they dominate the basketball and how it means that other guys on the court have to do other things. And there is not such an impetus on secondary scoring from specifically Maxey and Tobias Harris. And those guys are capable of having good scoring games. They're both talented scorers. If they get some shots and they hit those shots, they can put together good games. And we've seen Maxey do that. We've seen Tobias Harris do that in recent games too. He had his best game since James Harden's arrival against Orlando. He's been up like 28 or something like that. But I am concerned, most of all, by Doc Rivers' refusal to play guys who do other stuff. This is my biggest concern about Philly, is that if you're going to play Tyrese Maxey and Tobias Harris a combined 80 minutes, and then you're going to play Joel Embiid close to 40 minutes, and you're going to play James Harden 40 minutes, then no one else is really playing very much. You are saying, we're just going to play our starters. And people look and say, the Sixers bench sucks, they didn't contribute anything. He's not using them.
Yeah, you got to cultivate
He's
them.
using Niang and no one else. Yeah. I mean, I look at it and I'm like, if I'm going to compliment James Harden and Joel Embiid,
Isaiah Joe.
well, Danny Green's a good guy to do that.
Yeah.
And he only played a handful of minutes.
Yeah.
And Thibault, despite having maybe his best game of the year, only played 26 minutes. Isaiah Joe, like, maybe got in the game. I can't even remember. He might not even have played. Yeah. Shake Milton didn't play a lot. And now the response is that the Sixers bench sucks. Daryl Morey did a bad job.
No, you got to play these guys.
I don't think that's a bad bench. I don't think Green, Niang, Shake Milton, like maybe Isaiah Joe. I don't look at that and say, this is B-Ball Paul. Like, they suck. Yeah. Furkan Korkmaz, who is clearly a legitimate three-point shooter. He's been doing it for years, and he just doesn't play. I look at it and say, just as last season.
Yes, exactly.
When we talked about Doc Rivers and we detected something that was a problem in the second half and said, this is going to burn them.
Yeah.
The way they use Ben Simmons is going to burn them. The way that Tobias Harris is now, exerted his will on the offense and become a larger part of the half court set as a ball handler, this is going to burn them. This bodes poorly. That's how I feel right now. When I look and say, Tyrese Maxey should not be playing 41 minutes.
I agree.
There is no reason for that. You don't need his scoring. You don't need his ball handling, and he can't defend.
Right.
He doesn't rebound. You don't need him on the floor for 41 minutes. You don't need Tobias Harris out there not being a good defender, not being a spacer, not being a plus passer. You don't need those guys out there for 80 minutes, and that's taking up a lot of that oxygen that should be going towards Danny Green, Matisse Thybulle, George Niang, Shake Milton, Furkan Korkmaz, Isaiah Joe, guys who do other stuff besides ISO score. And this, I'm saying it now, this feels like the Sixers' potential downfall in a second-round series. That Tobias and Maxey are going to get played into the ground, and they just will not have a diversity of skill sets on the court to be good in transition defensively, to space the court adequately, and so on and so on. I'm calling it now, Andrew.
As a Knicks fan, as having orange and blue DNA, and loving the Sixers, but just putting on my Knicks cap for a second, this is delicious. I also see their downfall. I think they have the team to win it all. But their point of view on the court is interesting because forever, how many years we were talking about the potential poor spacing with Ben Simmons on the court, which ends up kind of being an issue with Doc Rivers in the playoffs last year. The spacing right now is not much better, and Ben Simmons is not even there. There's an issue in that James Harden is the only player that draws legitimate gravity away from the rim. And it kind of like makes life tough for Joel Embiid, kind of makes life tough for Tobias Harris. And by letting go, I mean, when the trade went down, you have to make that trade. They got their man. James Harden is their guy. And I think Daryl Morey looks at the roster as like, well, we have Korkmaz and Joe. Like, we also, and Danny Green, we also have spacers there. All you have to do is develop them into the role of a Seth Curry, who is like, doesn't score in the volumes that would raise eyebrows, but if you compare his numbers to Tyrese Maxey, and I know Tyrese Maxey is very lovable and fun and new, Seth Curry is like, he holds up well to Tyrese Maxey as a person on the court. And the amount of attention he demands as a shooter changes the complexion of the spacing. And if James Harden isn't doing the things he is accustomed to doing, and you know, you can scheme against him, he's great. I think there's no reason to look too hard at him, no pun intended. But if he's your only spacer and he is trying to do other things, like you say, because other things have to happen on the court, facilitation, switching, trying to create space for other players, if he's involved in that and not taking shots, like you have a problem. And it's a beatable problem, as Kevin Durant has come out and just said.
Yeah, after that drubbing they handed Philly, Kevin Durant said, "We know they're not a good transition team. We ran them."
Yeah, exactly.
And that he made a mention that, you know, if you pass the ball and move it around the court, they kind of stop chasing after a couple extra passes. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where I'm going with this, is that I'm not concerned about the Sixers' offense in the playoffs. If you have Harden and you have Embiid, you're going to be good. They are going to pile drive you with free throws. They're both really talented. They're both hyper efficient. Yep. You know, Harden is a fantastic passer. Embiid's pretty good. I just have no worries about offensive lineups with those two guys. I think they'll be great. I think they'll be fantastic. It's just too much firepower in two high usage guys. My concern here is that you don't have guys on the court who do the other stuff. I think spacing is a concern, and it gets a little exponentially wonky when it's Thibault and Maxey and Harris. But the biggest issue to me is stuff like defense.
I know.
You know, Thibault is a ridiculous defensive player, but when you have Harden and you have Embiid, then I think he should probably be playing like 40 minutes a game, and not in the low 20s.
Yeah.
Like, you need to have an elite guy on the court, and you have him, so you play him.
Yeah.
You don't need Maxey out there for 40 minutes. He just has diminishing returns. What is Maxey going to do for 40 minutes? Does he rebound? No. Does he pass? No. Is he a great shooter? No. Is he a good defender? No. He's a scorer, and he's a good one.
Yeah,
but it leads to this situation. He's really good at scoring, but he's not elite. He's not hyper efficient. He's had some good games, but this is what I mean, right? We look at these box scores and we say, well, Harris wasn't the problem. He scored pretty well. Or Maxey wasn't the problem. He scored pretty well. And the next game, you know, Maxey shoots poorly or Harris shoots poorly, and we say, oh, they had a bad game. That was the problem. And we just do that on a nightly basis.
Yeah.
And we're basing their impact on their box score.
Yeah.
Did they shoot well? Did they score well? And we're saying, oh, that was good. Nah, they were okay. Oh, they were bad. They were bad. The issue is that they never defend. They never space the court. They are never great passers.
Yeah.
And getting guys like Thibault or Green, even Korkmaz or Joe, I just think, I'm not saying don't play Tobias Harris and Maxey. I'm saying these lineups need a little, like, love and care. They need a little massaging. You need to figure these out in ways that are better than saying, okay, just put our starters on the court for 40 minutes a game and hopefully we'll win.
Is Danny Green being massaged on the sidelines? Is it his hammies that's preventing him from playing bigger minutes?
I think he is a little. I mean, he missed the game he's missed a few games. I'm not sure if he was on a minutes restriction last night or not. But Doc has been very reluctant to play Thibault and Green together, which I think is absolutely the way that I would go.
Yeah.
I think those guys next to Harden are ideal. Mm-hmm. And I think you got to play Niang or you play Tobias, unless you're going with one of them as like a small ball center. I think putting those guys together, I ran some numbers. I put up a tweet about it earlier today, and like they are basically the worst transition defense in the entire NBA in
right?
lineups when Niang and Harris are both on the court, and they're actually even worse when Embiid is with that group. So like that's a problem.
Yeah, that is.
When you're just getting run.
Yeah,
they're giving up like 1.5 points per possession on transition opportunities, and they're happening like 25% of the time they're on the court. And like, then, it's just they're getting fucking aired out.
And that's what happened in the Nets game. A part of me wants to say it's just one game, but
that's what happened last night too.
Yeah, there's revealing things that happened in these games, and we can think of it away as, it's just 2 regular season games. It doesn't matter. I'm like, but there's that blowout versus the Nets was telling. The Nets, Durant knew exactly what to do. If they add Simmons, another downhill player, like Jesus Christ, adding Simmons to Kyrie and KD is just like I hope we get to see that. This is wild.
I mean that Tobias and Niang combo has played about 500 possessions over the course of the year, so it's more than just the last few games. It's definitely been skewed by them because 500 possessions is about 250 minutes, so not huge, but noticeable. Yeah. And so they're in the second percentile in terms of transition defense as like the points per possession. The frequency, they're in the 25th percentile. I misspoke. I said there was 25% of their possessions, but it's 16, which is bad. And then points per play, second percentile in the entire NBA. So these are just things that you look at and you say, are you best preparing your team to defend in transition by playing Tyrese Maxey a lot, by playing Tobias Harris a lot? Or do you have personnel who might be able to help you better? Could you put Paul Reed out there and add like another rim protector and an offensive rebounder? Could you play Isaiah Joe and space the floor better?
Just have a launch.
Green and Thibault necessary to have a competent transition defense because they are your 2 fastest defensive players and your only 2 like wing players who actually can guard anyone? I don't know. I think that these are real questions.
The real question is Mike D'Antoni next door just done with his cheesesteak, wiping his mouth from the whiz, has his brother Dan D'Antoni on deck? Are they just waiting to enter the building and like weaponize this roster? Not to make a war reference.
Whether it's D'Antoni or someone else, I'm from what I've seen so far, I think the Sixers have the talent, if optimized, to be a very legitimate contender. And if not optimized, which in my opinion they are currently not being for the second year in a row, they are going to suffer a similar disappointing fate as last season.
I know. They could still win it though. But
totally. Same thing last year. They had a chance. But you knew the problems that had manifested.
Right.
I mean, with Simmons and Curry versus the current one, I mean, they were certainly a lot better on defense.
I don't want to get roasted on Twitter by saying this, but to our Patreon subscribers, like I like them better with apex defender, Seth Curry as a spacer, and Simmons as an elite passer. I just think it does a lot for Joel Embiid and the whole team with those 2 guys. I
mean, Harden is fantastic, and the offense has been great. To me, you just have to figure out how to be good on both sides of the ball. Their offense with Harden and Joe,
it's like a top 7 or 8, right? Like with Harden on the court.
I mean, those guys. I mean, according to I can just run the cleaning the glass numbers just really quickly that are just for when you have Joe on the court and you have Harden. Let's see. Sorry, bring it up. I'm doing this in real time. This is the kind of show that we run.
It's amazing. It's perfect.
So they're currently in the 98th percentile in point differential and the 99th percentile in points per possession when Harden and Embiid are on the court together. They are ripping it up.
Yeah.
And the defense has been pretty decent too. Not great, but good.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about that group. I'm worried about other stuff.
Yeah. Fair enough. Are you worried about Kyrie Irving not giving the Sixers the test that we all want to see? Like, is your boy Eric Adams going to let him play or what? What's your take on this?
Well, so I was at the game, the Knicks-Nets game on Sunday.
Well, you got your vax, so like it's all good.
Well, before we get into Eric Adams and New York City's Byzantine COVID laws that have aroused the anger of Kevin Durant and Nets fans, I will say this. Obviously, KD is incredible to watch, and he had 53 points, one off of his career high in their victory over the Knicks, which was a thrilling, fun game.
Tough competition, yeah.
They rose to the competition. Mm-hmm. Managed to take out those feisty R.J. Barrett-led Knicks.
Julius Randle.
But so there's a point in the game. It was in the first half when I think it was the first half. Yeah, it was the first half when Kyrie enters the building.
Yeah, that's right.
Wearing a big fur coat.
Was it fur? Or
like,
it was like a coat with like words all over it. I forget what designer it was.
Yeah, maybe it wasn't fur. He's wearing a big coat.
Yeah.
Looking like Meadowlark Lemon or something.
Nice.
And I mean, it's Swag City, and here he comes, the king of Swag City.
It was a cool moment.
He comes in there, and this roar starts within the arena. It's just like, oh my God, it's Kyrie, it's Kyrie. And then the players on the court are kind of looking over there, and KD's looking over there, and KD goes and puts up a three, and Mitch like smacks it back in his face because everyone's just so distracted by Kyrie coming out there.
Focused. Yeah.
It's like if you were at the Garden and it was like Bernard Hopkins was fighting, and like they're like, Tito's in the building. Yeah. And everyone just starts like rustling and making noise and taking photos, and like
Kyrie knows
Tito's
what he's
like
doing.
Walking in.
Yeah.
And it was iconic.
Yeah, it was great.
Honestly, it was amazing. It was amazing. And
TV showed
it also kind of, put in relief how bizarre this current rule is, where he can go to the game and sit in the crowd and not wear a mask while being unvaccinated, but he can't go in the locker room or sit on the bench or even play. And
he was at the Duke game a few days before.
It looked very ridiculous.
Yeah.
But it also has made Kyrie kind of a hero, which is weird because he was vilified for pretty justifiable reasons due to his anti-vaccine, status. Mm-hmm. But now people in there chanting, "Free Kyrie, free Kyrie," and the jumbotron is actually putting people's up there, showing them wearing their shirts that say "I stand with Kyrie," who are the same people who rushed the gate on the opening night and tried to force their way into the stadium. They were also wearing "I stand with Kyrie" shirts and holding "I stand with Kyrie" signs. So now the Nets organizationally have kind of locked arms with the people who did the January 6th behavior on Barclays Center.
I mean, Kyrie, I think anti-vaxxers have a good point. I think it's scary. You don't want stuff injected in your body. I get it. I got vaxxed as soon as I was available. I'm ready for the fourth. When Pfizer said there's going to be a fourth, I'm like, sign me up. I'm going to get it. I think it's a great thing. It's a great step for humanity, all this stuff. But if you don't want to get it, I understand. It's scary it was not an easy experience. It was sad and depressing and a little terrifying. And I understand why people like Kyrie don't want to do it, because there has not been enough testing. He just feels like he's not been properly represented in the test trials, like doesn't want it. And I think he's totally fine to feel that way. The problem is you just can't. You're at the victim of certain dumb rules, and I think these rules in the NBA and working in New York City in companies doesn't make sense. Everyone's right about that. It's hypocritical. It doesn't add up. That said, if you choose one thing, you have to abide by the rules of another thing, even if that thing isn't perfect. And the NBA and Eric Adams should not let him play. That's where I stand. If he wants to get the vax, he can play. But they have to conduct their policy in terms of the broader population. And forever, how much I want to see Kyrie Irving on the court at Barclays, he can't play. And we just have to live with that rule. That's it.
Well, I think there's two sides of this, and one of those is that yes, Kyrie should adhere to the same laws that are put in place to prevent transmission of the novel coronavirus, and for the benefit of public safety, and for the sort of carrot and stick approach to compelling people to get vaccinated. He, as a superstar athlete, he should not be treated differently than other people. I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah.
I think that's true.
Hundreds of people got fired from their jobs.
Right. No, I firmly believe that mortals like us and immortals like Kyrie should be treated all equally. Really a core belief over here at Cookies Hoops. At the same time, I also think that people who are repelled by Kyrie's decision not to get a vaccine, and I'm not talking about you at all. You've expressed perfectly how you feel about this. But people who are critical of him may say, well, if he doesn't like the rule, he can just get vaccinated. But he's made it clear that he's not going to get vaccinated.
Exactly.
And he's paid the consequences professionally, both in terms of, criticism and, the irritation of his own teammates, including his former mate, James Harden. He's lost $20 million or whatever. He's missed, he's going to miss 60 games out of 80 or something this year. He has paid strict prices for his stance, which we don't have to agree with, and I don't agree with, but he has paid the consequences for it. And I think we can also say, just because we disagree with him, it doesn't mean that any law or any rule can be applied to him if it's unfair. This reminds me of like Saudi Arabia, where someone gets their hand cut off for stealing some chiclets from a store, and people say, well, that's not fair. The punishment doesn't fit the crime. This isn't justice. This isn't right. And someone could say, yeah, if you can't do the time, don't do the crime.
Right.
If you don't want your hands cut off, don't steal a pack of gum. And you're like, I detect little bits of that in this conversation about Kyrie, where people say, well, if he would just get vaccinated, then, he wouldn't have to worry about this nonsensical rule in which he can sit here and be on the court but not sit over there on the court, or play but can go to the games, or not be in the locker room. Like, we can address these rules as being silly or worthwhile, valuable or punitive, without passing judgment on his decision, which he has made clear how he feels and has paid the consequences for it.
Yeah, I agree. And there's various degrees of this. I mean, he's not allowed to play in this building, and oddly, because he's allowed to be in the building. But I don't think that that's a high price to pay, to be honest. And it's not like cutting off someone's hand, which is, I think, a different conversation. But
I am not saying they're the same thing. I'm just saying that mind state of saying, well,
just
someone
do what I would
makes
do.
This decision,
right?
Exactly. Then whatever the consequences they get are justifiable. And I'm like, that's not true. That's not how we believe the world should actually exist.
Yeah. And now that this team looks exciting and KD's back, a lot of fans want Eric Adams to, like, well, the other shoe's going to fall. Like, transmission rates are going down. New York is in pretty good shape, barring another variant. But this rule seems ridiculous, but Kyrie just cannot play, and that's just it. Rules, not all rules make the most sense, and Kyrie has not said anything. I mean, he kind of peacocked around, kind of grandstanding about the hypocrisy of it, but like, I don't think he should get vaxxed. I think he should just play as much as he can, and Eric Adams has to look out for his city.
I don't really know a good explanation for why Eric Adams has not changed those rules. I mean, it may go back to
Yeah.
them,
But he's-
firing employees who didn't get vaccinated and just being reluctant to change those rules after making that decision. I don't know. I mean, statewide, the rules are different.
Yeah.
There are almost no cities in America that currently have the same rules as New York City. And I say this with no judgment either way. New York is
Pretty good.
very clearly an outlier
Yeah.
in terms of rules and always has been.
Yeah.
I think people who are in New York or San Francisco or a few other big cities, Chicago, etc., would be shocked to learn how many places did not have vaccine checks at restaurants or bars.
Yeah.
Like, it was a tiny amount of cities. They just happened to be big ones.
Yeah.
New York, Chicago, Boston, Philadelphia, New Orleans, a few others. That was it.
Yeah.
It wasn't as if most American cities ever even checked like Vax ID cards, etc. I'm just saying New York is an outlier in this regard. And yes, Kyrie has to follow those rules 100%. But I'm also unclear why New York at this point has laws that nowhere else does. I just don't know what the argument for that is.
The argument, I think, and this is where we elevate the importance of Kyrie too much. Eric Adams is in a tough spot now. He cannot change this law while the Nets are in the playoffs now, because it'll look like he's doing it to serve one guy. And I think he's in a tough political situation where he makes himself vulnerable to his critics if he does that. As soon as the Nets get eliminated, if they do, or if they win it all, he'll probably be like, okay, everyone can do whatever they want, like other cities, if it's safe, at that time. Right now he can't. He's stuck, and stuck politically, and people are waiting for him to do this so they can pounce on him. That's all it is, I think.
At the same time, I don't really know who's going to pounce on Eric Adams, who hasn't, just because he's in his first term. He's got a couple more years.
But he has self-interest in mind, right? He's not going to be like, well, people hate me anyway. Like, he's trying to provide his the best outcome for him, whatever that may be.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that the reluctance to doing it right now may be the
Optically, it's
perception
bad. Yeah.
that it's just for Kyrie. I'm also kind of saying that, the numbers now are like lower than they were.
That doesn't matter, though, because the law is in place. Like, all this information, you're right, totally. But it doesn't matter because we're talking about optics.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just saying I don't know the non-optical argument at this point. I just don't know what it is.
Oh, yeah,
I'm
no, I
literally
agree.
Ignorant of what the reluctance is to say, okay, we're gonna get rid of those restrictions.
He should have done this months
is it-
ago.
I just don't get it. I'm with you though that the timing now makes it kind of weird and dicey.
Yeah.
By the way, Daryl Morey just posted the Bullies shirt that the Cookie Shirts have made available.
That
What a
damn
king! What a king!
As we're potting.
Most sizes, most sizes still available. I think some of the double XL are out, but yeah, if you like those Bullies tees, the latest in the series is there and dwindling fast.
Maury approved. Maury is not only one of my favorite GMs, obviously, but the dude is cool. Thank you for posting that, Daryl Morey. He's hoping for the return of Broadway for his... What?
I see that someone is already knocking it off. That was fast.
Yeah, it'll happen. But the interns move faster than Kevin Durant in a fast break. So keep your eyes peeled for more drops this season.
Yeah, I'm feeling perfect. How you feeling?
Pretty perfect.
I think that's perfect enough.
Yeah.
So, yeah, perfection.
If I could describe the way I feel in one word, it is perfect.
Cookies.